Hi. Oh my goodness, it's late. Actually, I was asked to read, so it came as a recommendation, which I was a bit surprised, so I am. I did want to continue this on, and I did want to finish doing this. I have kind of been letting it fall through the wayside with everything that has been going on. So, with that said, I am reading the Walk in the Light series, Restoration by Todd Bennett. I am on chapter 4, and I always say because this is along the Hebrews and he does use the names and a lot of the Hebrew language, I really struggle to pronounce things correctly. Like I said, I'm on chapter 4, and the chapter was on paganism, and it's a little bit of a long chapter. So just a quick synopsis of what I have read about Babylon and how Yahweh scattered the inhabitants over the face of the earth and confused their language. And we talked about pyramids and ziggurats, which are a big part of the sun worships. And if you were to look those up, you would see that they are all over the place. We talked about how the people continued their pagan practices in their new locations despite their language. They continued to worship. Things were called, obviously, by a different name. How sun worship continues today, and the names of the gods are different, yet they are the same. Those who fail to know and learn from history are destined to repeat its mistakes. That line the Catholic walls, and the Catholics kiss their feet and pay homage to these pagan sun gods, but they call them Peter and other characters of the Bible. Though through all this and more, Yahweh began to call out his people who would choose to love and obey him, like Abram, who was the first person who was called a Hebrew, which means crossover. Later renamed Abraham, he was called a Hebrew because he crossed over the river and was different from all the lands that he traveled. He remained close to Yahweh despite what other people were worshiping and doing, and as he and his household served and obeyed Yahweh. Touched upon the golden calf. The northern tribes were committing spiritual adultery, the house of Yehuda and paganism, then the Queen of Heaven weeping for Tammuz and praying to the sun. There's a whole thing on that we were touched upon. And then we talked about where I left off was in the 4th century BCE, Alexander the Great which as a society was pagan at its core. Interestingly, Alexander at a young age in Babylon, the city which he planned on making the capital of his new empire. under the control of the Roman Empire, and that is why the term Greco-Roman is often used to describe the culture in this region and period of history. I don't know if it's just that I'm tired. I start to stumble and just boo. Sorry. While the source of political power had changed, the polytheistic nature of these world religious systems had remained the same. While the source of political power had changed, the polytheistic nature of these world religious systems had remained the same. Polytheism, which is the belief in many gods, was the norm. Rarely would you find a person that did not acknowledge the gods in every aspect of life. This stood in stark contrast with those who followed the Holy One of Israel as the one and only Elohim. Thus, Israelites and later Christians were referred to as atheists because they did not believe in the numerous gods of their culture, only one. That is what atheist means, one who does not believe in the gods, or rather one without the gods. In modern times, the term atheist generally refers to one who does not believe in any god. But historically, this is a fairly new concept. Belief in many gods was the custom throughout the world, and it has only been since the spread of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, monotheistic belief has dominated the world religion. Okay, let me try that one again. Belief in many gods was the custom throughout the world, and it has only been since the spread of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that monotheistic belief has dominated the world religious scene. Thus, Israelites were typically in the minority and seen as unbelievers since they did not believe in the popular gods. This is a good example of how language, perception, and semantics can change over the centuries, and the modern usage of the word can actually be the exact opposite of its original meaning. Today we see countless religions, sects, as denominations. They are worshiping according to the truth. In the beginning, there were no religion, just the truth. Religions are man-made belief systems, and I try to avoid the trapping of religion wherever possible and whenever possible. Interestingly, those in the Western culture are not so accustomed to identifying pagan behavior because many unknowingly participate in pagan activities and mimic pagan behavior, which derives from the Greco-Roman source of their civilization. I was once a Christian who in many ways acted like a pagan without even realizing it. I was a Christian and thought that I was automatically exempt from being labeled a pagan, heathen, sinner, you name it. While in reality some of my actions were no different than that of a pagan. This statement may appear to be an oxymoron, and for it to make sense, we must provide a definition for the word pagan. You can probably find numerous definitions for this very broad term, but generally a pagan is one who worships a god or gods in a fashion contrary to the worship found within the scriptures. Without an understanding of paganism, it will be impossible to understand some of the commandments of Elohim. They simply do not make sense unless you recognize that he was trying to keep his people away from pagan practices, which he considered to be an abomination. A pagan is often defined as someone who does not belong to a major monotheistic religion. And the world is often used interchangeably with the word heathen. In the context of this discussion, I will use the word pagan in its purest sense to describe a person who is either actively or passively involved in idolatry, which is the recognition and worship of false God as identified within the context of the scriptures. We would spend a lot of time refining and parsing these definitions, but I am more concerned with presenting the general concept to the reader who can re-examine their definition of these terms as the discussion continues. And I am going to stop there for right now, and I'll continue later. I'm not going to comment right now. I will as I get into it a little bit more, because it's going to start getting good. Because a lot of people get mad when you use the term. If you were to say that, if you refer to them as a pagan, or if you say that they're actively participating in pagan practices, even if you try and show them according to the scriptures what you're talking about or what it means, a lot of people don't want to believe it. It's like people want to believe certain parts of the Bible, but they don't want to believe the whole Bible. They want to take out what they want to take out what they want. They want to use what they want. I don't know. It's really, and I'm not saying it's easy, and I don't claim to understand it at all. I am trying, and I am learning, and I mean, this is a whole nother chapter, but like the Trinity, people will take a couple verses to support their claim on the Trinity. Now, I don't believe in the Trinity, and a lot of people get really super upset about that. But in the studies that I have done, I have to go. I'm going to just wrap it up here. I know I'm cutting this off kind of like, so I'll talk to you later. I'll continue this on. I have to address some things that have come up. Have a good night. Bye.